Off to the Ryman we go. V-I-P. Don't you forget it. Guess who just made me get up and sing? Dovidas. He has no shame. Why, thank you for the great service. Back again.
Red carpet.
Hey, in my back, Texas. Yeah, a slightly reddish carpet.
Get a little bit of a little more sensuality to it all. Mythos. Apps are inside and drinks as well.
Oh, wow.
My name is Edward Cole. I'm the CEO of Fender Music. What a joy it is to have everyone here tonight. On behalf of Fender, we want to thank you, to the artists here tonight, for not just being part of the celebration, but for helping shape what the Telecaster means today. All of the creativity, all of the music that comes from their heads and their hearts. And we want to thank to all of you for being part of it. So let's celebrate the next 75 years the right way, the Nashville way, the Fender way. And let's have an amazing, amazing night. And don't forget, play guitar, play Fender. Let's have a great night tonight. Woo!
When you reflect on 75 years of the Telecaster and the innovation that, you know, started it all off, what's your favorite period of time, and like, what's your favorite era within those 75 years?
Within the 75 years of the Tele, I would say my favorite time is kind of late 60s to mid 70s, which is actually maybe as it was trying to be resuscitated, I would say. The Tele at some point had just fallen out of favor, and it wasn't near as popular as it had been, where it was really a defining guitar through the 50s and 60s. And you know, Fender was kind of like, what do we do to kind of give life to the Telecaster? And they brought in Roger Rossmeisel, who had worked at Rickenbacker, and they brought in Seth Lover, who designed the PAF humbucker for Gibson. And so they were really trying to reinvent this thing. So it was a period of hyper creativity for the Telecaster. So in that couple of years, you have mahogany thin line Tele, you have the ash thin line with the double wide range humbuckers, you have the Tele Custom, you know, which has the neck humbucker and the new pickguard, and then you get the Tele Deluxes with the two humbuckers, and even with tremolo, you know. So the amount that we were playing with the form of the Telecaster to kind of try to be competitive as the world kind of moved into this much more like kind of classic rock direction, the Tele kind of just at some point was at perhaps more of a low ebb than it ever was, and then it's completely come back and taken off. But I think creatively, that's kind of the most fantastical time. And the other time that's interesting is just the initial wobbly legs genesis of the Telecaster. I mean, the Stratocaster came out and it was everything that it was supposed to be out of the gate. Eventually woods changed and things like that, but Strat's a Strat, Jazzmaster, Jaguar, but the Tele kind of had this snakehead prototype guitar to an Esquire, to a Broadcaster, to the Nocaster, to the Telecaster very publicly. And so even in thinking about 75 years of the Tele, it's kind of 75 years of Telecaster, but it's probably 76 if you're kind of going through the entire arc of what it is. And I think that is just kind of showcases how much it was like a live mixing kind of situation. And these instruments were new, you know. I mean, one of the first trade shows Leo took the Telecaster to, people said that thing will never sell, you know, and it was an abomination because everything was, you know, luthiery and carved tops and, you know, bracing, and here were these solid planks of wood screwed together crudely with metal and plastic and things. So, you know, now you say, draw an electric guitar, you know, in someone's mind, you know, or just draw one for me, and it's a Strat or a Tele in most cases. But at that time, when that came out, that is not what people thought of when they thought of an electric guitar. It was more like a jazz box.
Where do you begin now with your leadership position and actually going, what's the future of this instrument that has such a legacy?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think guitar is solved, but the line is always moving as well. So I think as music changes, how people record, how people, you know, use it, how they perform, what inspires people, where music's going. I mean, you know, as distortion became huge and people were using pedal boards, that changes pickup design, you know, and as people get into different things, you know, like in the shred days of the 80s and stuff, you know, fingerboards got really flat and you had huge frets and you had very skinny necks, and then it goes back to big necks. So it's really kind of keeping your ear to the ground and just servicing, you know. It's great when gear pushes music and is, you know, providing something that moves things forward, but it's also about kind of giving people the tools that they need to make their music. And I think really the revolution is happening with what you plug the guitar into. So digital amplification, you know, floor units, things like the Tone Master Pro, effects, you know, recording in the box with plugins versus analog, all of that stuff. You know, people can play the most complex digital rigs, and then they will be plugging, you know, like a 50s style Telecaster into it, you know. But the gear, it is cool because the gear does sometimes change music as you go. I mean, when the Telecaster came out, because it wasn't a jazz box, you could play it louder, you could turn it up more, and it would feed back less. When the P-Bass came out and everybody could turn up louder than an upright bass, everything got louder, PAs got louder, and then that made amps overdrive, and then that created new music and new songs. And so it is cool in that symbiotic relationship between what people want, what people need, and where music's going. But yeah, the guitar itself, now it's really about what speaks to someone. It's not fashion, but it's taste. You know, it's like there are people that are very vintage minded and vintage inspired. There are people that want something that looks classic, but is kind of modern playing. And then there are people that want something like, give me the latest stainless steel frets, compound radius, you know, all noiseless pickups and all of that. And so we are always messing with new bridge designs and, you know, all of the pieces that make a guitar. And I think it's not really about drawing a new shape or anything like that, but it's the idea of a guitar as a system. You know, a Telecaster is not just a body shape. It's a Telecaster bridge. It's Telecaster pickups, Telecaster pickguard, Telecaster headstock. The whole thing is the sum of its parts. And I think operating within that system and just trying different things, you know, can create inspiration. And I think that's what we're looking for.
For those of you who do not know what we do, basically he plays guitar and I sing, so I don't know really what the fuck I'm doing here, but I'll stand here and if he falls over, I'll catch him. You know, how about that?
How do you navigate between you and your team and, you know, the years of experience at Fender, the artists that come in and have their set of imagination, their inspiration and everything, and then also thinking about the customers and the players out there gigging on Broadway, you know, like the people aspiring to be musicians? Like, that's a lot of imagination.
It is, and I think that's the reason that there's not, you know, if you look at an old catalog, there was Stratocaster, there was Telecaster. It was one, you know, that's what we offered, and maybe some custom colors, etc. Now there's so many different versions, and it's because everyone's imagination can take you wherever. And one of the beautiful things is the modularity of our guitars, that it can be a lifetime. You know, you can decide, I'm getting into progressive metal, I'm getting into jazz, and you can swap a couple things out and that guitar can still be your ride or die, you know, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, even last night at this show, I mean, you see Jack White out there, that Telecaster is nothing like what Brad Paisley's playing, which is nothing like what Kingfish is playing, and Brent Mason. Brent Mason did that to his own Telecaster because he needed a guitar that he didn't want to bring 8 guitars to a session. And so we really, you know, before the internet called it crowdsourcing or whatever, it's always just listening and just seeing what are people doing with this stuff. And that's been one of our big strategies with like offset Jazzmasters, Jaguars, because those are tweaky guitars and a lot of people change things, you know, and or fix things and do things. And so it's like, well, let's just make them that way out of the gate. So, yeah, but it's a lot of years. And I think it's really 3 things. It's like you have to offer what's expected, which is like the classic stuff. You have to pay homage to the brand. You have to offer kind of what's expected, but maybe a little bit modernized and refined. And then you try to have some things that are not expected and that no one would ask for. You know, I think it's Noel Gallagher has that speech that it's always circulating, you know, the world didn't ask for Jimi Hendrix, but they got him, you know, it wasn't a focus group or anything like that. So we're always trying to kind of operate on those 3 lanes, I think, at the same time.
reflecting on last night's show and then thinking about your career of 30 years at Fender, was there anything that hit you specifically about last night? Any particular performance or artist?
Well, I think all the performances were awesome. Larkin Poe blew me away.
Me too. We were talking about
so good.
All right, are you ready? Ladies and gentlemen, Billy Gibbons with Larkin Poe.
Don't you ever be sad. Lean on me when the times are bad.
Unbelievable, and the soul, the emotion, and just energy was insane. But everybody, and I think it really is. It's that you can't paint the Telecaster with a broad brush. You can't just say, "Oh, it's for this kind of music" or whatever. And I think that's one of Fender's kind of struggles. Is they say you can't be everything to everyone, but these aren't metal guitars or rockabilly guitars or country guitars. They really can do everything. You know, it's such a simple tool, but it's like, you know, one of those Michelin star restaurants where like there's very, very simple, few ingredients, but just done so well. And that's, the Telecaster is this honest foundation.
He's changed music. He's a legend. He was on Saturday Night Live just a couple of weeks ago. He has a signature model Tele, and he's going to come out and he's going to blow us all away. Jack White.
With everyone that you've worked with over the last 30 years, is there any sort of memorable advice that you received that you'd like to pass on?
That's a great question as well. I think everyone is so unique in whether working with artists. One of the important things here at Fender in my 30 years has been kind of my mentors that have worked here. So I worked for Dan Smith, who is kind of one of the people that kind of kept, brought Fender back from the post-CBS era. Working with him was amazing. Tim Shaw, who works here in Nashville. And so I've just always been a sponge. And so I think kind of taking in that history and then laying that artist layer on top of just how the people that actually use the tools out there, but also understanding how it all goes together and, the internal part of it, and just learning really about guitar making from the inside. There's so many experts in wood and engineering and like that. We just spent a couple hours talking about all kinds of stuff here this morning before this. And so I'd say it's really the keeping of the flame, I guess I would call it, we're talking about 75 years of the Tele. It's a long history and it's a heavy weight. It's an honor, but it's a thing to steward, and that we owe it to the Telecaster and to Fender. And Fender's 80 this year, so it's pretty amazing. And so, but positioning it not where it's just a retrospective exercise or we're a nostalgia company and we just make old stuff. It's like the next 80 years, Mm-hmm. Fender can be pigeonholed as this company that's, it's the 50s and 60s or the golden era or any of that stuff. But, it's always been an innovative company. I mean, the guitar was revolutionary at the time when it started, and it's never stopped changing. The maple necks became rosewood necks, the pickups changed, the bridges changed from brass saddles to steel. It's just always been moving, and it's never stopped. And it's going to continue to never stop, because we're just going to continue to color inside the lines and just try to optimize, the recipe and just keep it relevant for people to make new music.
I feel like that applies to musicians right now, because there's a lot of fear around, AI. And I feel the thing that gives me a bit of security is that you are still producing real instruments for real musicians.
Yeah.
And there have been so many threats to the music industry overall, not just products and not just the record industry.
Yeah.
And you've kept a solid footing.
Yeah, the human element, there is a connection. You sit at a piano, you sit at a set of drums, you wear a guitar. It's not just like kind of touch velocity or dynamics like on an MPC or something like that. It's literally the nuances of how your vibrato, how you bend a string, how hard you fret, like where you're picking, by the bridge or up by the neck. The humanity in a single note, is one of the reasons the guitar is such a vital, instrument. And even pop artists, electronic-based artists, if someone wants to kind of go for that credible moment, like they pull out a guitar and play a song with a guitar, and it's just like almost the most communicative, And so I think our instruments are handcrafted still, and Fender's a big company, but there's over 100 hand processes in every instrument. They're still handcrafted, and we take pride in that. And, all those hands touching an instrument that you get, so we make our art so people can make their art, which is their music. And I think that there's going to be a demand for authenticity, human connection, human interaction. So human music, human guitar, instruments and things like that. So I don't think that's going anywhere. Craftsmanship is, as vital as ever.
Last night confirmed that.
Yeah.
And so, thank you for putting on this event, and thank you for putting on last night, because it was so aspirational and like life-changing for me to be sat in the position I was, looking at those amazing humans playing the way they were, but for them to also have a human connection with Fender, such a big company, for them to all know to show up
Yes.
and deliver.
Yes.
I mean, that's what gave me shivers, because I was like, oh, there's the connection. You don't get this lineup without being Fender.
Yeah, and I think we can get kind of tied up in the making guitars of it, and the guitars kind of being, they go out into the world. You send them to an artist on tour, you send them to stores, and you see people playing them and stuff, but there's not a disconnection, but a layer maybe in between. And this event kind of brought it all home. And it's like, it's about the music. It's about the music that has been created, will be created, that there's this kind of stalwart guard, but there's also these young players that are now carrying the torch, and the versatility of genres. And the fact that, we said we're putting this on, and people were like, I'm in, say less. Like, we had to make the dates work, but it was really, we want to do this. And people were like, awesome, and it is, to us, it wasn't to celebrate ourselves, it was to celebrate the music that's been created on it. It's to celebrate the body of work and to thank these people. I mean, the guitars are great, we love them, but it's really what people do with them that has kind of given them that. So being able to really connect to that, this is the art is why everybody does this.
coming, everybody. We hope you had a great time.